For the longest time, when I first started writing and talking about game design through game wisdom and such, I thought that randomization was kind of the magical cure-all for game design. This was around like 2010, 2012, with the likes of games like The Binding of Isaac, FTL, Spelunky, and so on and so forth. And this was the time where we really started to see developers try to embrace more roguelike elements in their games. But over the years, I've come to realize that randomization for the sake of randomization may actually make your game worse and not better. And that's going to be the subject for today's critical thought. And this comes from playing the game Sundered, which I'm going to have a first look video up at some point. But Sundered, similar to The Binding of Isaac, makes use of a pseudo-procedural generation, in the sense that the common areas of the game are they're fixed, but every time you die, the game will kind of shuffle what paths you have access to within those general areas. And of course, major rooms like bosses, upgrade chambers, stuff like that, they are hard-coded. And the problem I have is that the randomization does not go far enough to impact the general play or the moment-to-moment gameplay. And this is kind of our major topic for today, and where randomization does impact the game, and why a lot of titles tend to slip up on us. When we talk about moment-to-moment gameplay, we're referring to, again, how the run is going to change and grow over the course of a single playthrough. And as we've said before, this requires understanding what are the hard and soft elements of your game's design, as well as the algorithm for game generation. So, for instance, in a title like The Binding of Isaac, the hard elements are what biomes you're going to run into, the possible boss types, and even knowing that there's going to be a treasure room on the floor, a shop, the sacrifice chamber, etc., etc. The soft values, or what's malleable, are the elements that can change when you go through an individual run. So, in The Binding of Isaac, I may know what biome to expect. I don't know what rooms the game is going to pick. I don't know what enemies are going to fill said rooms. And of course, I don't know what treasures and possible consumable or basic items I'm going to get. Now, those elements are what make each run feel different. Now, what we see in a lot of lesser roguelikes, or roguelike style games, is that they will use randomization kind of as a way of a very basic form of changing the game. But the problem is that this level of variance is not changing the moment-to-moment gameplay. I am still doing the same exact thing over and over again, but maybe instead of going left, right, left, I go right, left, right. And that's not changing what I'm doing. It's simply just window dressing. This is one of the issues I have with some of the titles like Don't Starve, or survival-based games, that when you're changing what biome I start at, or the order that biomes will be generated in a level, that still isn't changing the basic gameplay. If every time I play a survival game, I need food, grass, and rope in that order, then guess what? That's going to be my general path from beginning to end. One of the things that we see in strategy and grand strategy-based titles that make use of random or procedural elements is that what they go for is kind of a difference in the mid-game. So every time you play Civilization or Stellaris or anything like that, your early game is going to be the same no matter what. If I'm playing Civilization, I know I gotta found my first city. I know I need to start getting agricultural. I need to start researching. I need to age up. But what happens in the mid-game, once everyone has been established, is a different story entirely. Something along the lines of XCOM would be another example. XCOM features a lot of hard elements in terms of what researches I need to go after, what missions I should achieve, how my characters upgrade. But there's a lot of soft elements in terms of what maps I'm going to get, how they will unfold, and even what items and stuff I'm going to get in what order that dramatically change a single playthrough. And this is where randomization is good. Again, you need to impact the moment-to-moment gameplay at some part of your game experience. If not, then it doesn't matter how random or procedural your game space is if I'm just repeating things over and over again. And before we move on to some game footage, it's important to talk about things from the other side of the equation, and that is the idea of pure randomization, as in everything and anything can happen at any time no matter what. As we've talked about before, pure randomization does not make things better, because there must still be some semblance of order in your game, or there's just no way of properly balancing it. We've talked about this before with the idea of roguelikes, and how even if they're designed around a huge amount of variance, there is still some control built into the algorithm to determine or to create a basic path through. And while that may seem limiting at first, as we switch to our game, we're going to talk about how even having those hard-coded moments or elements can still afford you a lot in terms of replayability. But first, a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters. And now a quick shout out to the supporters over on patreon.com/gwbeiser. Dead Cells is a great example again of how the randomization may not change the overall scope of the game, but it does a lot to affect the moment-to-moment gameplay and in the process make the game very replayable. So with Dead Cells, similar to something like the Binding of Isaac, the player is going through a set of known biomes over the course of an individual play. I know what areas I'm going to visit, which in turn I know what environmental hazards and what enemies I'm going to find. The difference, though, is that the overall layout of the level is changed on each time, as well as what possible items and upgrade points I find. And those individual elements go a long way towards changing how a single play of Dead Cells was going to go through on each run. And that is a big point again about how randomization adds to replayability. With something like Dead Cells, it would have been easy for them to just use either the same layout or have the same items and upgrades spawn in a level and call it a day. But even though our main character here is very agile and able to react very quickly, it would still make the game play the same way. This is kind of the issue that I ran into with Sunder, by the fact that my character is so agile in terms of how she can move, double jumping, wall jumping, and all that, that it doesn't matter what path I take through the levels or through the rooms, because I'm just going to move through it as quickly as possible. And what that means again is that the moment-to-moment gameplay is not changing. With Dead Cells, however, just getting one colorless item or getting one really great item that synergizes with your build, that changes everything, for good or for ill. The same thing goes for something like Slay the Spire. In Slay the Spire, again, the biomes that you're going to visit over the game's 4 acts are fixed. There will never change. I will never run to, Act 3 as the first act, unless for maybe some crazy daily run variant. But all the individual elements that can happen and change over the course of a run make it very replayable. I don't know what enemies I'm going to find in what order. I don't know what events I'm going to get at the question mark rooms. And obviously, I don't know what cards the game is going to offer me when I win a room. And those elements, again, greatly change what's happening. And like we said in the first part, our kind of motto for today's video is that if you want randomization to really matter and to improve your game, it must affect the game at the moment-to-moment level or layer. Because if it doesn't do that, then I'm just going through the motions, run in and run out, and it's not really mattering. Going back to Sunder again for a second, it probably would have been, I think, a little bit more concrete or having a much more stable gameplay loop if it just kept with a fixed environment and not have to worry about procedurally generating or procedurally shuffling up each area on a new death. Because again, it's not adding to the experience. There's a game that we played from Harebrained Schemes. It was like a Souls-like, that the name escapes me at the moment, that also ran into that problem. that yes, you are generating a new level or a new environment, but it's not changing at all what I'm doing. I'm still finding the same things, I'm still going through the same paths, but just telling me that I'm going left instead of right or going to a blue room instead of a red room, that doesn't impact the game. And when you try to throw in randomized elements like that and spend a lot of time working with them, all you're really doing is, again, shuffling elements around without creating true randomization and true replayability. This is also why, again, franchises or games like the Dwarf Fortress likes are so popular in terms of replayability. Because so much of what you're going to do in those games is dependent on the events that can happen, how your characters behave and grow. So that even though the basic gameplay loop of building your settlement, getting resources, etc. remains fixed, how everything else happens and how you respond to them greatly changes that experience, and why so many people have vastly different stories and AERs for those of you who play Dwarf Fortress. But to begin to wrap things up, my question for everybody watching: can you think of other examples of games that try to do a lot with randomization, but in the process, the game doesn't become replayable? And here's another challenge. Can you think of games with a linear or more hard-coded set of elements that still manage to be a replayable experience, even though you're still doing a lot of the same things on each play? Let me know in the comments below, but thanks for watching today's Critical Thought. Tune in for more discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. And check out patreon.com/GWBlazer if you will get mentioned on our thank you page. But that's going to do it for this video. Thanks again for watching, and I will see everybody next time. If you're looking for another book about game design, be sure to check out my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, out now. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel linked down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.